Welcome to Learning the Law, a podcast about all things legal with a focus on current events, where we try to teach you things in an hour. My name is Ashley, aka Phoenix Nymphy, and my co-host, who's the man of the hour, Ron, my husband, who doesn't have to deal with the audio. This podcast is purely educational and should not be taken as legal advice. This podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship. This podcast is based on his interpretation of relevant law, because he's the one with the degree. Any opinions expressed are the opinions of the individuals making them and do not reflect the opinions of any firm, company, or other individuals. Ron is a licensed practicing attorney in the state of California.
Yes, I am, and have been since September 15th, 1999.
There we go. All right. So we are a little late, about 24 hours and 30 minutes late, right? We were supposed to do this last night, but I was having a day yesterday. I was struggling. I had like no energy. Just it was a bad day for me yesterday. And Ron had a rough day at work, so we just said we'll push him back a day. And then today I had a doctor's appointment, and then he had PT. So we got pushed back about 30 minutes so that we had time to prepare for this. But we are here, and this is This morning every morning we listen to the news, and we were listening to PBS NewsHour. Last night's PBS NewsHour, and they were talking about the NRA bankruptcy. And we thought that would be a really good topic to talk on today. So that is our topic.
Yay.
Yeah, it is very, yeah. Like, I don't, yeah. So the NRA filed bankruptcy in January of this year, and they filed to avoid litigation in New York, which the Attorney General in New York City, or in New York, the state of New York, the Attorney General for the state of New York, filed a lawsuit to sue the NRA due to
basically financial mismanagement and misuse of funds from a nonprofit organization.
Yeah, they sued to dissolve the NRA due to mismanagement of funds. In the note, which I'll post all of this stuff in the notes, but there's a lot of articles on this, and I've read a lot. So in August was when they actually filed the lawsuit against the NRA. The Attorney General accuses LaPierre, the CEO, and his wife of using thousands of dollars in NRA funds to buy Christmas and birthday presents for a principal stakeholder of the company that did business for the gun group, as well as the stakeholder's wife and daughter. And they're alleging that he also spent, $300,000 on business suits to a boutique.
In Beverly Hills, yep.
In Beverly Hills. And there's a lot of other fun, like there's an entire list of funds. And actually, in the litigation for the bankruptcy, they weren't really disputed. Not all of them were disputed. He actually admitted to quite a few of them, which is surprising.
Well, he believes he's entitled to these things.
But it's a not-for-profit organization, so he's not really. That's a mismanagement of funds.
And therein lies the problem.
So, the NRA was chartered in New York a century and a half ago, according to the New York Times article. It was chartered a century and a half ago. So it's one of the oldest organizations in America. And it filed bankruptcy in federal court in Dallas and is seeking to move its charter to Texas, where politicians are far more favorable to the organization. But the position of the U.S. Trustee's office, which, well, I'm quoting stuff. So they filed it. They filed a bankruptcy. So, okay. All right. We're just going to just dive right in. They filed bankruptcy in Texas, but
Yes.
they're chartered in New York, and they haven't moved the charter yet to Texas.
Right. And their headquarters is in Virginia.
Okay. So I mean, your specialty is bankruptcy. How do you file bankruptcy in another state when you're like, is it just because it's a not-for-profit? Like I'm so confused. If you are a not-for-profit and you have to file bankruptcy, first off, where would you file bankruptcy? Would it be where you are headquartered, or where would it be where you are chartered?
Generally, it's your state of incorporation.
Okay.
Your charter.
So it would be New York.
Yes. Now, general rule for bankruptcy is you have to be a resident, and this is for people. You have to be a resident of where you're filing for at least 6 months.
Right. That's for your average everyday person.
I just couldn't move to, say, Alaska and file bankruptcy the next day.
Okay.
If I did, the Alaska court would take it, but they would remove that bankruptcy filing and put it in the California courts. Now, why didn't they do that in this case? Why wasn't this Texas filing moved to New York? It may still be moved to New York. That could be one of the things the judge rules next week. However,
well, why did they allow like all of this process to go through already though?
I can only think that the courts found that there was enough business contacts with IE members within the state of Texas to find that there's enough presence there, and has been presence there for years, if not 150 years.
Layman's terms, please. Can you explain that a little bit better?
Basically, there's enough NRA members there that they could consider to be a resident.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So it's okay. So everything that we've read, it is clearly evident that they filed this bankruptcy in order to avoid litigation in New York. And my question is, can you do that with bankruptcy?
Okay. The purpose of bankruptcy is not to avoid litigation, is to avoid your debt.
And according to the CEO, they're not in debt. They're at the best financial. If you look at
they've had in years. Yeah.
Yeah. So how can you file bankruptcy if you're financially stable? Like, I thought the whole point of bankruptcy was to help get out of debt. So if you're financially stable.
They are financially stable right now.
Yes.
They have $35 million of debt coming due in 2022.
Okay, but wouldn't that be when you file the bankruptcy?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
You can file the bankruptcy on debt that hasn't become due if you know you're going to be having to pay that debt. For example, if you get in a car accident, your fault, you totally kill 4 people, you're sued for wrongful death. Or no, you're not even sued for wrongful death yet, but there's that possibility. You can file bankruptcy on that possibility. I see Remus has joined us.
He's wagging his tail. Hey, buddy. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah,
So,
you can.
so you can essentially file it preemptively.
Yes.
I fed you, buddy. Okay. All right. I'm okay. So
So
they filed bankruptcy in January and we're now in May. So they had the final proceedings on Monday.
yeah,
They had the closing litigation on Monday. So
right now that's not the closing of the bankruptcy case. That's the closing of the adversary proceeding, i.e., the trial within the bankruptcy case.
okay, can you kind of explain that whole thing to me?
Right. They filed a Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
Okay.
That is a reorganization. And as we've discussed in previous podcasts, a reorganization is different than a full bankruptcy.
Okay. So the litigation thing that was Monday.
Yes.
Okay.
And they filed for a reorganization, which is different than filing a Chapter 7. In a Chapter 7, all their assets would be liquidated for their creditors.
Okay.
And then the Chapter 7 trustee would decide what happens with any leftover assets.
And is there a trial? Is there a trial for
Okay.
for all bankruptcies, or is it just specific ones?
No, just specific ones.
Okay.
It's called in a bankruptcy, a trial is called an adversary proceeding.
Okay.
And in this particular adversary proceeding, someone filed suit against the NRA as to whether or not this is a legitimate good faith filing of bankruptcy.
Wait. Okay. Hold up. So they file. Hold up. All right. Let me make sure that I'm understanding because I don't know this stuff at all, and I am a little confused.
Okay.
So they filed bankruptcy in January. The NRA filed bankruptcy in January.
Yes.
And so Chapter 11, which is a reorganization, which that I understand. And then the within that bankruptcy, someone came in, which I don't know who it. Someone came in and said, "This is not okay. They shouldn't be filing bankruptcy. This needs to go away." Now, is that the trustees who filed that? Who filed that?
I'm assuming it's the Attorney General for the state of New York.
Okay, okay. All right, all right, that would make sense. So
now, the reason why the NRA needs to file the bankruptcy, and I'll put this in a nutshell, they want to reorganize in Texas. Granted, any corporation can reorganize, I shouldn't say reorganize because that will confuse people. Any corporation can reincorporate in another state.
yeah, why wouldn't they just do that?
Because New York has a law that a corporation cannot be dissolved without its permission. So the NRA could start a new corporation in Texas.
It wouldn't be the NRA though.
But it wouldn't have any assets.
Okay.
All those assets and all the money would be tied up in New York because the NRA doesn't have permission to dissolve itself.
So, okay, if they want to reincorporate in Texas, why don't they just take the hit and just reincorporate in Texas anyway? I mean, if that's what their goal is, like.
Because I believe their latest filing said that they have $75 million in assets.
Okay, so they're trying to keep their money is what they're trying to do.
Yeah, they're cash heavy.
Okay. So one of the biggest issues is that it's a non-profit organization, but the top CEO, like the CEO and everybody, are taking the money and using it for personal gain and making themselves rich. So, and they've admitted to some of their spending in the litigation. Yeah. So why not just change to a for-profit organization, and then you don't even have to deal with this.
Because you'd have to reincorporate in Texas as a for-profit corporation.
Can you do that in New York, though? What's stopping you from doing that in New York?
Because you'd have to dissolve the former corporation, the not-for-profit.
Oh,
they don't have permission to do that.
Because New York wants to dissolve them and remove their money from them.
New York has a specific law that stops corporations from dissolving without the state's permission. And I will say the state litigation may not be successful in dissolving the corporation.
Yeah.
A guardian or a conservator may oversee, appointed by the state, may oversee the corporation to get its finances back in regulatory manner.
And the reason why, so one of the big reasons why this is such a big thing, and I know that like their attorney is like, yes, it's cringeworthy how some of their spending was, but it's not that big of a deal. But it is, because you're stealing money from taxpayers. You're subsidized. You're subsidized by the government. You don't have to pay taxes because you're not for profit. So
that's how you're subsidized. You don't get money directly from the federal government just because you're nonprofit.
Yes, but you're still essentially stealing because you're not paying taxes on that. You're not paying taxes on that money, and you're abusing the use of that money, and you're not telling people where you're putting that money. And that's the bit. And so it is a major deal. It's not minor. This is not a minor situation. People go to jail for this stuff for a long time, and he should go to jail. If this is, he's admitted to a lot of this funding, a lot of this misuse of funding. He straight up admitted to it. Yeah, this mother effer should go to jail.
Now, here's the thing. If he was in a private corporation that had stock and everything, he's perfectly fine. If he's in a nonprofit organization, what he's doing is wrong, most likely illegal, unless he discloses everything in the financial statement, which apparently was not done.
Right. They were saying that these trips and stuff were business trips when they were actually not business trips. So they were hiding and lying about it, which is why it's such a big deal. The NRA obviously gets tons of funding and tons of money, and they lobby. And like one of the biggest things that I was reading is a lot of the funding that it goes to politicians. They bribe politicians with this money by giving them gifts and lavish gifts and stuff like that. And that's common. It's not uncommon.
Gotta say, when you say bribe,
it carries a heavy weight. I know.
In effect, lobbying
is bribing,
but it's not legally bribing because lobbying is permitted.
You mean lobbying is legal bribing?
Yeah, lobbying is legal bribing.
Technically, it's legal bribing.
Just like billable hours of an attorney is a legal way to steal from your client.
Oh, God, that's so messed up.
Yeah. You get. I won't get off onto a tangent on that, but in another podcast, we'll talk about billable hours.
Okay, all right. Let me write that down so I can... Billable hours. Oh, yeah. So you can know if you're being... That's actually really good. That way you know if you're being ripped off by your attorney. That's actually a really good idea there. So this... Okay. So one of the things that they stated is that they filed this because... They actually filed and countersued the state of New York because they're saying that New York is using illegally. They're stopping their First Amendment rights for, they're impeding on their free speech. And so, but yet in this litigation, you have the U.S. trustee who is over bankruptcies come in and say, I'm all over the place with this. I don't even know where to go.
Yeah.
Like, there's just so much. There's so much to look at this here. Okay, so basically, they're saying that it's not fair. You're being political to us, but then when, or it's not fair. They're using politics as a way to get out of it. But then when someone says something that they don't like, they call, oh, you're bringing politics into this. They're being extremely hypocritical about it. It's
right.
like, but honestly, you're a political group. It's always going to be political.
Yeah. The Attorney General's job is to enforce state laws.
Yes.
Now, the state laws are enforcing fraud, misuse of funds. Whether or not the target is political, and I'm not going to weigh my opinion on that, whether or not it is, possibly laws were broken.
Yeah.
So it needs to be investigated. It needs to be litigated.
And they're trying to get out of that litigation
by running to Texas, right?
But the Texas judge hasn't given any direction on which way he's going to go. However, a major thing, the United States Trustee Program oversees the integrity of the nation's bankruptcy courts. And they actually stepped in on this particular case.
Right.
Why is that so important?
An overview of the Chapter 11 and the U.S. Trustee's role in it. The U.S. Trustee's Office oversees every single Chapter 11 filed in the U.S. Every so often, there has to be a creditors meeting. There's a U.S. Trustees meeting where the attorneys for the bankrupt party actually has to go and report to the U.S. Trustee what is going on, what the funds are, how the funds are being used. So the U.S. Trustee is involved in every Chapter 11 case. However, the U.S. Trustee is not involved in hardly any adversary proceedings in those Chapter 11 cases.
So they're kind of like a tertiary group. It's like after everything has gone through, then you go to the trustees.
Oh, during the case, you see the trustee about every 3 months, every quarter or so. You have to make quarterly reports.
Oh, but they don't get involved in litigation, generally speaking.
No, they're just oversight.
Okay.
For them to get involved in an adversary proceeding is extremely rare, and there has to be a great purpose to it.
Okay.
And the U.S. Trustee, I believe you have that note. The U.S. Trustee said, what'd they say?
I'm trying to find. Okay, so the position of the U.S. Trustee's Office, which weighed in during closing arguments, which was on Monday, on the final day of the trial, is likely to weigh on the presiding judge, who said he will decide by next week. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, did I not? Oh, I must have not actually. I guess I didn't actually quote it. What did they say? Let me pull up the article. Okay, so Lisa L. Lambert, a lawyer in the United States Trustee Office, this is from New York Times, which is part of the Justice Department, said the evidentiary record clearly and convincingly establishes that Wayne LaPierre, the longtime NRA chief executive, has failed to provide the proper oversight. For a number of years, she added, the record is unrefuted that Wayne LaPierre's personal expenses were made to look like business expenses.
Yeah. Did she go on? Sorry.
I'm trying to find that. What is the actual statement? Okay. Okay, Miss Lambert, the assistant U.S. trustee in Dallas, disagreed, laying out episodes of alleged corporation corruption by Mr. Lapierre and other NRA officials, a number of which were not disputed during the trial. She cited spending by the NRA or its contractors on tailored Zegna suits, meals at a fancy Tucson restaurant, charter flights, yada, yada, yada. I don't know. Yeah, that's all it's. Yeah, that's
all in the course of fundraising.
yes.
If he didn't do these, we wouldn't get the funds necessary to lobby all the congressmen. Is basically the argument.
Yeah, her statement basically is it is unrefutable that he doesn't have a leg to stand on in this bankruptcy trial, therefore it should be dismissed.
Yeah.
And like at the end of the article, like the NRA straight up, she adds, here it is at the very end. Miss Lambert said the evidence presented in the 12-day trial show that even after the self-described course correction, the irregularities were not fixed, noting that among other things, Craig Spray, the former chief financial officer, refused to sign the NRA's 2019 tax filings. The NRA has stated that it is seeking refuge from the New York Attorney General's actions and wishes to change its state of incorporation. That can be done outside of bankruptcy. It is not a legitimate reason for filing bankruptcy. There it is right there.
Right. Bankruptcy is for debts.
Yeah. There is not a legitimate reason.
Hold on.
Sorry.
Even with the $35 million coming due in 2022, the NRA apparently has enough assets to cover those debts and still have about $40 million liquidity after that.
Yeah.
So what they're trying to do is get around that dissolving permission law of New York State.
Oh, so they're okay, I see.
Because in a bankruptcy, then they can get permission from the U.S. trustee's office, who oversees everything, to dissolve the old corporation and reincorporate in Texas.
Sounds like it doesn't matter because they're not going to get that permission from the U.S. trustee.
You have no idea what a Texas bankruptcy judge is going to do.
That's what that. Lambert is from the U.S. trustee in Dallas.
Right. But she's not a judge.
Oh. But if the trustee doesn't allow it, don't they supersede the judge? Wouldn't they supersede the judge if they're the ones who oversee all of these?
Nothing will supersede the judge from the U.S. trustee's office. The U.S. trustee can just say, "We don't approve your plan."
Gotcha. Okay.
The judge, however, and as a tangent, bankruptcy judges only have a 14-year term. They are not lifetime judges. Most federal judges are lifetime and really don't care about the way they rule because they know they can't be removed.
Right.
So this particular Texas judge, you don't know how she's going to rule.
I believe it's a dude.
Okay, you don't know how he's going to rule. Is he coming up on his 14 years and he wants to be reinstated? Then he's at the mercy of the system and whether or not they want him back.
Right.
He could do various things. He could dismiss the case outright. He could punt the ball and move the case but he could move the case to New York or Virginia, where they have their headquarters or where, they're chartered. He doesn't necessarily have to dismiss the case. But in order for a bankruptcy to go forward, you have to have good faith in its filing. And what she was getting at is they filed this in bad faith. There's no legitimate reason that they file this other than they're trying to, and this isn't a legitimate reason. They're just trying to get rid of the regulatory oversight from the state of New York because apparently bad things happen there.
What do you mean bad things happen?
Fraud, misuse of funds, not telling people who actually give you money that you're going to go spend it on a suit.
You're
or a
talking about the
chartered flight.
NRA bad
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that was I just lost my train of thought. Continue. I just lost my train of thought.
Okay. Well, all I can say is if the judge allows the case to go forward, it opens up a Pandora's box of any state attorney general going after any nonprofit that is misusing the funds to just reorganize in some other state. So, for example, if this goes through,
Sounds like it takes away the power of the state attorney general
right,
and the oversight of not-for-profits, which kind of that's really not a good idea.
I'll give another example. I don't know that this is just a hypothetical.
Right. But
Georgia's attorney general decides that it wants to sue the NAACP for misuse of funds. They could just move to California. Or, somebody some state attorney general wants to go after the KKK for misuse of those funds because they do fundraisers and they do membership fees. KKK could just go to, say, Michigan or Idaho. You take away the regulatory oversight and the legal consequences of their actions if this case goes through.
And that then opens up to so much more corruption within nonprofits, because then you can have, that and that means every nonprofit. I mean, look at how many nonprofits actually. Oh wow, that
means I could incorporate an entity called Money for Ron,
right?
A nonprofit organization, and the purpose of it is to just distribute money to people called Ron. And I somehow get people to give me money. I don't know how I would, but say I get people to give me money. I determine in my powers that I should get 99% of that money because, well, I'm a Ron and I need it. I need suits. I need charter flights. And I find a couple other people named Ron and I give them a couple of bucks. Well, that's a pretty gross misuse of these nonprofit funds. And California comes after me. I'll just go to Maine, Florida, Texas.
And so,
and not have any consequences.
And just like with shareholders, when you find out that someone's using the money that you've invested into that particular business or corporation, you get frustrated. Like,
the thing is, shareholders can vote their asses out.
They can.
There is no shareholders voting their asses out here.
You don't get that here. That's why you need that oversight, because it can really, really.
Right. Now, the directors of the nonprofit could vote all these people out. except they're the ones that are benefiting from it.
Well, and one of the things is he filed the bankruptcy without even telling any of his officers or the board.
Right.
LaPierre filed the bankruptcy on his own without permission from the rest of the organization, which is kind of telling because I feel like that's something that the board of the organization should vote on.
Yeah, you would think so.
So it feels like it just all feels really messed up, and they should deal with the consequences of their gross misuse, and be dissolved and lose all of their funding and have to start over with better people.
But even if they get dissolved, they're not going to lose all their assets.
Okay.
Not unless there's a hefty fine involved in the New York state litigation.
Okay, so say they are dissolved, and I'm actually curious how that happens. Like, because I mean, New York definitely wants to fine them heftily. I know that they want to, fine them heftily for their gross misuse of funds and all of that stuff. So they're not going to fine them, 70, what was it? What'd you say? $1 million?
70 million.
Yeah, they're not going to fine them $70 million, but it'll probably be a couple $1,000,000. And then where does that money go? Does it just go to the board and they get to split it?
You mean the leftover money?
Yeah. What happens? Like, would they not be able to just use that to reorganize somewhere else?
Yeah.
Okay.
You take those assets and reorganize
Reorganize?
reorganize in Texas.
Yeah. Okay. So again, why can't they just take the hit? They're not going to lose all of their assets and then reorganize.
I suspect that
He'll probably go to jail.
Once the litigation goes through, that there's going to be some criminal charges brought.
So, okay. So your opinion, you suspect that there's some criminal charges that are going to happen, and the CEO is actually trying to cover his own rear end.
And the civil litigation to dissolve everything is just a way of getting evidence for that criminal investigation.
Interesting. So
now it happens in criminal cases all the time. After the guilty verdict comes in on the criminal, then you have the civil for the generally wrongful death. It happened in the OJ case. Even though OJ was found innocent, he was hit with the $32 million verdict in the civil litigation because the jury found it was more than likely he was
guilty
of the yeah.
So, all right.
In this case, it's reversed.
So you think that there's some suspicious, some it's a little sus, and they're avoiding something that will eventually come out.
Yeah.
So if you were the judge on this bankruptcy case, how would you respond? What would you say?
I would dismiss the case for bad faith filing.
Is there a fine or anything like that as far as bad faith filing? Like, can you
generally not a monetary fine, but I would sanction them from being able to file any further bankruptcies.
Would they be able to file a bankruptcy again later, but just not
if he dismisses it with prejudice?
So you mean if they got themselves into debt, they would not be able to file a bankruptcy ever again if he were to dismiss it that way?
Well, there's a time limit on it.
Okay, that's what I was trying to ask. So there would be a time limit, but it'd be 7 years or something like that, which is your standard bankruptcy.
Yeah. 5 years, 3 years, 7 years, up to the judge within reason. Now, the other reason you file the bankruptcy is because generally bankruptcy stops litigation.
Yeah.
However, there is an exception to that rule for government action.
So you mean the thing in New York was still going on while the bankruptcy was going on, or did it actually pause?
As long as they ask for relief from the automatic stay, they will get it, and that litigation in state court will still continue.
What's the automatic stay?
The automatic stay is the protection put in place by the bankruptcy court, generally towards
So when you say
creditors and debtors.
Okay, so when you say they file for relief from automatic stay, can you kind of explain who they are? And
the automatic stay is put into place so people or entities that file bankruptcy don't have to undergo any legal proceedings like debt collection, eviction,
wage garnishment,
etc.
Okay.
Now, the exception for governmental entities means that a government entity can come into the bankruptcy court and say, hey, we need relief from this stay. It doesn't pertain to us. We have some actions going. And so they would be, the Attorney General of the state of New York would have to go into the bankruptcy court and say, hey, we need relief from stay.
So basically, Attorney General would get to say, hey, this actually has nothing to do with us. We still want to continue with litigation and sue them.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, in reality, why would it? Right. Why would that? How would that ever stop it? Because it really doesn't have anything to do with them.
Right. It doesn't.
Interesting.
And so I don't think we've heard the end of this.
No
matter what the judge says next week, because one side or the other is going to appeal this.
Yeah. So this is going to take some time.
Yeah.
Do you see them reorganizing in Texas anytime soon?
No, because this will go to the Supreme Court. Whether or not the Supreme Court takes it, different story.
Yeah, I see this going to the Supreme Court, especially when their attorneys are already claiming this is an impediment on our First Amendment rights, blah, 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 which is not accurate. It's not true. They're not stopping them from being able to talk. You're not stopping the organization from being able to talk about what you want to talk about. You're stopping them from using money illegally. That has nothing to do with your First Amendment rights. That has nothing to do with free speech. Like, I don't know how can you claim that it's an impediment on my First Amendment rights? No one's stopping you from being able to gather and talk about guns and gun rights. You don't even have to be an organization to do that. So I just find it really fascinating how lawyers just so confidently say stuff like that. But that's their job. Yeah. That's what they get paid to do. They get paid to do that. They get paid to lie. But
thanks, honey.
Well, appreciate they do. It. You do. You get paid to lie. You're not the one that's on stand.
I know. we get paid to
to bend the truth.
Particular position.
Right.
We just interpret the evidence as we see it.
Right. Uh-huh. And on that note, I think that actually covers this topic. It is. I didn't even realize. I remember the comment. I remember hearing about them filing bankruptcy. I did not. I didn't realize that the state of New York was actually suing them. So this was actually really interesting to discover and read up on. And I definitely want to keep an eye on it, because like you said, if they are allowed to reorganize without having to deal with this stuff in New York, it can definitely, you're right, it's going to open up a Pandora's box. There's a lot riding on this. It's a bigger case than you ever would have thought about.
And it's not something, in my opinion, the Supreme Court can just say, no, we're not going to hear this case.
Yeah, this is a case that I could see the Supreme Court having to be involved in and making decisions on, which is, I don't know. I mean, they have surprised me on some of their stances lately, so I have no idea how it would go. I have no idea. Like,
right. You may think the most conservative judge on the bench is going to go one way, and then all of a sudden
they go another. Yeah.
Goes another.
Which has actually been happening, which is so wild.
I will cite John Roberts saving Obamacare.
Right?
Yeah. No one saw that coming.
Right? Exactly.
But when you have lifetime terms and you don't have to worry about
losing your job,
being reelected, losing your job, you have a little bit of freedom to.
You tend to actually take your time and look at stuff.
Yeah.
And consider all sides of it. So, yeah, I can see why that is a lifetime position. But anyway, I think this was actually a really interesting discussion, and I hope that everyone enjoyed it. Thank you so much for listening to Learning the Law. If you like this podcast and want to hear more, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and share in all your favorite places. You can find it hosted on Twitch live at twitch.tv/PhoenixNymphy on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. If we,
Yes.
I'm just going to read it like it is. Okay. I realize that today is Wednesday. Occasionally, we don't change it. We don't change it that often. So I'm not even going to, okay, focus. Thank you so much for listening to Learning the Law podcast. If you like this podcast and you want to hear more, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow it, and share in all your favorite places. You can find it hosted on Twitch live at twitch.tv/PhoenixNymphy on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific. Use the hashtag Learning the Law on all your favorite social media platforms to follow and see more there. You can find Ron on Twitter at Necrokijo. That's NECROKIJO. And Ashley, me, on most social media platforms at Phoenix Nymphy. If you have any questions, please tweet, comment, or email us at twolazydogsmedia@gmail.com. We love your questions. Please, please, please send us your questions. We want to know what you want to know. This has been a Two Lazy Dogs production.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.